Hello and welcome to another weekly update, the first of 2021. A very happy new year to you and all your family, your team, your organisation from me. Lots of things to talk about already. It's interesting to kind of see, there's a couple of things I want to call out that kind of maybe paved the way for what the next couple of weeks and months might look like, that I think would be interesting. There's no real new items of news so much. There's some things that I've done kind of in between Christmas and New Year that we can talk about. There's some things I think I want to call out that other people have done. And so let's get into it. So first of all, let's talk about Microsoft Teams and meetings inside Microsoft Teams, and specifically for Microsoft Teams developers, what that means for extensibility, because there are new extensibility options for building inside meetings in Microsoft Teams. I've talked about them before, and now there's some additional information and also a blog post that I've done. So the additional information is a blog post put out by the Microsoft Teams team on the TechNet community. I'll put a link to it in the description. And it talks about building like better meetings with apps in Microsoft Teams, and it gives a couple of good examples of what that might look like. It goes through really some partner applications that are available in the App Source in App Source on the Microsoft Teams App Store. The ones that it talks through are an application called Decisions, one called TeamFlect, one called Slido, Breakthrough, and I think that's it. The four kind of partner applications that they talk about, and each of them has a screenshot, so you can kind of see how people are integrating their applications into Microsoft Teams meetings. So this is not particularly new information, but it's been a little bit abstract up until now. So it's great to see some real world examples of people doing this with actual applications today. That leads me quite nicely onto my next point, which was a blog post that I put out a few days ago, talking about how you would take a Microsoft Teams application, like a tab application, and turn it into a sidebar inside a meeting. So sidebars are just one of the different ways that you can extend meetings. You've got the kind of pre-meeting experience, and you've got the post-meeting experience, and you can have tabs on both of those. And then there's also inside the meeting, there's the meeting chat experience you can extend, but then also there's this meeting side panel. You can think of that like when you're in a meeting, you've got the participants. You can kind of toggle between looking at participants, looking at the chat message, the chat history, the chat window, the meeting details. They're all icons at the top of that kind of bar across the top of the meeting experience. As a developer, you could add to that and you can have your own icon in there. You can put your own applications in there. That's exactly what the meeting sidebar is. And in this blog post, I go through how you would take an existing application you have that might be a tab application, and how you convert that tab application into a sidebar. Because actually, it's really just configuration. They're very, very similar to tabs inside, let's say, channels, where you've got that kind of tab experience. A meeting sidebar, very, very similar. I'll quickly show you, you probably need to look at the whole blog post for the detail, but what's really interesting is that actually the way you configure something as a side panel is under the configurable tab section in the manifest, which is kind of funny. And what you do is you add an additional scope, for group chat, if you haven't got one already, and then you set this context of meeting side panel. So that combination of saying the scope of this configurable tab is group chat, and also the context is meeting side panel, that's what you need to do to have your application render. Now, if you are doing this from an existing application, which is a tab, and you're building this out thinking, great, this will also show up in my meetings, fine, and it absolutely will, you will need some way of knowing the difference between those, and knowing, is my user looking at my application in a side panel, or are they looking at it in a tab of a channel? There's a state context called frame context that you can use to look at that. All the details in the blog post. There's another massive gotcha as well in the blog post that I will just draw your attention to, which is down here. So I said earlier, all you need to do is add the meeting side panel context. That's almost true, and I think that's supposed to be true. There's a thing at the moment where you actually also need to add the meeting chat tab context. Otherwise, it's not going to show up for users in the right place in the Teams UI. That feels like a bug that's going to get resolved, but we'll see. But for now, like, just be aware that's a bit of a gotcha that you might end up spinning your wheels on like I did. But the outcome is you can take your tab application, you can put it nicely inside the meeting experience. This is what I was talking about with having your application show up as an icon here alongside kind of the raised hand, the meeting chat, everything else. Your icon can just show right there in the meeting. So it's a really nice kind of extensibility feature for Microsoft Teams meetings. I think it's really cool. Yeah. So go read the blog post if that's interesting and useful. There's a lot of detail in there about what you get. So yeah, hopefully it's useful. All right, next up. This was published a really long time ago, and I don't think I talked about it. If I did, I apologize. I feel like it maybe just sat on my to-do list for ages, and then I read it, and I meant to kind of bring it in and never did. Yeah, so this is a blog post by Jeff Teeper, corporate vice president of Microsoft, and it's all about Microsoft Teams as a platform for innovation. And this, really speaks to some of the stuff I've been banging on about in the last 6 months. It's really where Microsoft's thinking. This is, if you doubt at all that Microsoft are investing in Microsoft Teams as a place for developers to innovate, you absolutely need to read this blog post. Jeff goes through some real history of where Teams came from and what they were thinking when they built it and what the big plan was. There's an amazing picture from 1993, which I'm just going to bring up to the screen, with Satya Nadella, Jeff Teeper. There's a bunch of other people that I think I recognize as well. So that's kind of interesting. It'd be great if someone could go through and name all these people. Is that Gurdeep Singh there maybe? Anyway, interesting. Yeah, really interesting. So Jeff's obviously been around a long time, and it's really good to get his take on the platform, on what Teams is and what it means to Microsoft. So it's kind of a long form read, but if you want to kind of ease yourself back into the working year, this is a good place to start, because I think you could do that, and then kind of that sets you on a great path for 2021. Other kind of good things as well that I think are worth your time in kind of gearing up for 2021. Mary Jo Foley has put together her 5 Microsoft technologies to watch in 2021 post. She starts off by saying, making predictions is precarious, and even more so this year. But sets forth anyway 5 things which I think she thinks could impact Microsoft's business and their customer base in 2021. The first one is really interesting to me. Meta OS. We've talked about this a little bit before. I think it's one to keep an eye on throughout 2021. I think it's going to change how developers build against both Office 365, how they build against Microsoft Teams, how they generally build more against kind of Microsoft. I don't know how exactly. The way I kind of think about it is a bit like at the moment with Teams, we've got a kind of an abstraction and a common way to build like a tabbed application, and then that shows forth in like a desktop client, a web client, a mobile client, and it always looks great in all of them. I feel like we'll see something similar for many more kind of Office workloads across the board of like how we interact with Office, how we deal with Graph, I think there will be less developers making direct API calls to get stuff done. I think will be used more. I think Microsoft will generally kind of fill in up the stack, if that makes sense. So right now with Microsoft Graph, you've got quite a fundamental base layer of functionality, but it's kind of HTTP and it's base layered, and it's like it's at that level in the stack, right? It's quite low down. There are SDKs on top of it. There are some toolkits on top of it. There are some UI constructs on top of it. The graph toolkit has some visual constructs. I think something with Fluid Framework will come along and disrupt a lot of that. And I think in a year's time, we will all be building applications that incorporate the Office Fluid Framework for, I want a people picker here, I want a document selector here, I want my the next 3 things on my calendar to show up here. I think we'll be doing that a lot more, but we'll see. That's kind of my little take on it, but I don't know, we'll see. Other things that Mary Jo calls out, let me show you this blog post actually. So this is Meta OS, universal search. Yeah, it's again one to keep an eye on. I think it's all here technically. It probably just needs kind of introducing to users in the right way, I guess. So we'll see. The intelligent edge, so keep an eye on it. I think there's a lot of IoT stuff happening. I think security as well. I don't know if security is kind of mentioned in here, but maybe not. But I think intelligent security, I think, is one to keep an eye on. Cloud PC, this is quite exciting actually. This whole desktop virtualization. So a while ago, so I'm going to call out a video that I did with Mary Jo last year, 2020, talking about kind of predictions and stuff, and we talked about Cloud PC. I don't think this is so I made a prediction that I don't think. Mary Jo was very polite about it, but she didn't agree with me, which is fine. Around Cloud PC, I thought it would be really interesting if when Cloud PC came, it was not Windows. There's like an entry level or like a base level that is just Teams. So you pay a flat fee for a virtual desktop, but it just runs Teams. For your, how many office workers is that just actually all they need? I don't know. That was my kind of take. Be interesting to see, because you'll pay a flat fee for your Cloud PC, desktop PC running Windows that can run 32 Win32 apps and all the rest of it. But actually, if you just want to run Teams, that's a lot cheaper, right? So there might be a different pricing model for your virtual access to Teams, and it's just Teams and it's all in the cloud, and that's kind of all you need. I don't know. I guess if you get to that point, you're already at a fairly thin client, right? So you then connect with another thin client. So I guess it kind of doesn't make loads of sense unless they do dedicated hardware, like Teams hardware that just connects to the Teams cloud to run Team stuff. But I don't know. We'll see. And then Mary Jo's other prediction is around Windows 10X, which I have not been keeping that much of an eye on, if I'm honest. But yeah, there's plenty happening in 2021, plenty to keep us excited, plenty for me to keep talking about every week as we go into another year of weekly updates. I'm excited for what 2021 has in store. I've got some ideas for things I want to do. I need to be a bit more organized, I guess, in making sure I do those things, because otherwise they kind of get left behind a little bit and end up not happening. So that's kind of what I'm going to try and focus on, is making sure I do the things that I want to do. But yeah, anyway, bit of a ramble this week, but it kind of makes sense. It's kind of right at the start of the year. We're waiting for new things to come, kind of wrapping up the loose ends of last year, looking forward to kind of what the next year holds. I think it's going to be interesting. Hopefully it's slightly less of a roller coaster than this year's been, and we'll get back to some sense of normality by the end of the year. Honestly, don't know if that's true or not, but we'll just have to wait and see. Regardless, I hope you had some good time off. I hope you're energized for the new year and ready for it. And whatever else it is you're doing between now and the next weekly update, I hope you have a good one. And I'll talk to you again next time.